It's Steenhuisen out, Geordin Hill-Lewis in. But is this the correct move for the DA? Here's the answer. So a few days ago, John Steenhuisen confirmed what was probably one of the worst kept secrets in South African politics, which was that he decided not to seek re-election as the DA leader when the next elective conference comes up in April. But there is another poorly kept secret that could be just as equally poorly kept, which is that Geordin Hill-Lewis is being promoted to succeed him. But the big question is whether or not Geordin Hill-Lewis is the correct person to take the DA forward. And then there's also the question of whether or not the DA is on the right policy and ideological trajectory. But before we get into this analysis, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? It's entirely free, and all you have to do is click on that subscribe button below the video. Furthermore, if you would like to support the channel or perhaps enjoy some additional perks, consider becoming a Power Club member. You can do so by clicking the join button below. Now let's get into it. While a huge amount of rumors have been swirling around the media as well as social media in recent days, Geordin Hill-Lewis himself actually broke his silence on whether or not he would be the next DA leader. And he did so in this X post. So he explained that after John Steenhuisen's announcement yesterday, so it would be 2 days ago at the time of this recording, I have been approached by many party members to stand for the position of federal leader. The DA's internal campaign rules stipulate that public campaigning may only begin when the nomination period opens. This will happen later this month, which is when I will announce my intentions. Whatever is decided, I will remain committed to stand for a second term as the Mayor of Cape Town. It is the DA's biggest government and our strongest platform as we head into the local elections. If I do stand for election as DA leader, I would welcome a robust and principled process focused on competing ideas for the future of our party and our country. We have many excellent leaders, and an open exchange of ideas can only strengthen us. Thank you to all those who have reached out to me. It is an honor to be considered, and whatever the outcome, our focus must remain on serving every South African and building a country of hope. So one thing to unpack here is that Geordin has pretty much said everything apart from actually confirming his intention to run as the next leader. This could be due to technicalities. As he did explain, internal campaigning hasn't yet started, and ultimately, according to the party's rules, he can't actually announce whether or not he will be running. But it is pretty safe to assume that he is the favorite to become the next leader. And this leaves a very big question in many people's minds, which is whether or not he is the right leader based on his ideology. Now, you see, a lot of people have taken issue with Geordin Hill-Lewis's running of Cape Town, specifically when it comes to socialist appearing policies, such as this sort of almost a redistribution of wealth. You see, many people have taken to social media to complain about what they consider a redistribution of the rates and taxes that are paid by city residents, whereby although the more affluent suburbs pay the most in rates and taxes, it appears that the DA government in Cape Town is redistributing these funds and using them mostly to fund the lower income areas and obviously the more impoverished spaces. And then there is also the controversy of how so many migrants from places such as the Eastern Cape and even illegal foreigners have entered the city, and how it seems that they get away with living in these informal settlements whereby the city, specifically the DA-run municipality, is able to provide them with water and electricity and all the basics. And of course, I understand why a lot of people find this unfair. Why is it that those people are being supported for illegal activities, whereas the people who actually fund the city the most, so the highest ratepayers, are actually receiving the least value for money given how much they pay? But there's a very important thing we need to remember here, which is that although Geordin Hill-Lewis may be viewed as a left-leaning, if not even socialist candidate, this could actually work to the DA's benefit, and there is actually a good reason for them pursuing this approach. Now, For those of you who followed my channel for a while, you probably realize that I am a center-right, if not right-wing sort of a person. No radical by any means. I'm definitely a moderate sort of a person, but on the conservative side nonetheless. And there are many of you who I know would prefer the DA to be a more conservative party, or perhaps get a more conservative candidate. But the reality is that the DA has always been a classically liberal party. They may at times have conservative leanings on certain issues, and they may also have more liberal, if not left-leaning stances on many other issues. But the reality is that if you look at the likes of Tony Leon and Helen Ziller, they are classical liberals at heart. And so it's not reasonable to assume that the party is going to change their character anytime soon. Still, I definitely understand the issue with having more socialist or left-leaning leaders as well. But the very big problem that the DA is faced with is that they seem to be having an exodus of certain supporters, but they also seem to be having an influx of other supporters. Yes, they are at risk of losing a lot of conservatives to the Patriotic Alliance and the Freedom Front Plus, but what they need to consider is whether the exodus of those supporters is worth the incoming of other supporters, specifically disenfranchised ANC voters. You see, although a lot of ANC voters have fled to parties such as the MK and EFF, it's safe to assume that those are the more left-wing radical voters. But what's important for us to note is that there is still a very large contingency of moderate and centrist ANC voters. They may not be the more vocal people in the party at this moment in time, but they do still exist. And this really does seem to be the target market who the DA is looking to appeal to. And so if one is to do the maths, it may make a lot of sense for the DA to actually almost abandon the conservative base in favor of pursuing this more centrist or even left-leaning base. And we can see so through the numbers. So in a lot of recent by-elections, we've noticed how the Patriotic Alliance and even the Freedom Front Plus seem to be hacking away at the DA voter base in certain areas. And that's understandable because a lot of conservatives are going frustrated with the party. But the DA is seeing growth in certain other places. And for example, I'd like to look at this Ward 10 election in Makhanda. So last year, there was a by-election in Makhanda, which is in Mpumalanga, and this is an ANC stronghold. And for those of you who may have tuned into my by-election video at the time, you would have seen that the ANC used to be the overwhelming majority here. They had 84.9% in 2016, as you can see from my table here. But as we look at the graph on the right-hand side, we see how the ANC has completely plummeted, whereas the DA has overtaken the EFF and is really approaching the ANC quite quickly. As we can see in the 2025 by-election, the DA got 26.38% of the vote, or 335 votes, which is more than triple what they've ever gotten in their history in this ward. Let's now take a look at Govan Mbeki, Ward 14, which is another by-election in Mpumalanga, an ANC stronghold. So as we can see in this by-election, the DA came second. It's the first time ever that they've been able to do this in this ward. And we also see that they had 552 votes. And so they actually more than doubled the number of votes that they got in 2024. And they ended up with 26.73%. And as for the ANC, they've fallen from 1,305 votes in 2016 to 904 votes in 2025. Now, what's probably one of the DA's biggest achievements to date is their result in Emalakhleni Ward 26. So Emalakhleni is another populous ward in Mpumalanga, and over here we saw that the DA, for the first time in their history, won the ward off the ANC. They did actually do better here in the 2024 election as well, but what's important to note is that the ward seat was not actually up for grabs then. It was only up for grabs in the 2021 local election, and then of course in the by-election last year. And so the DA will be very happy with this result because it's the first time they ever won that ward. And then of course, there was the by-election this week in Langeberg, Ward 4, which is in the Western Cape. Now, of course, the Western Cape has been a DA stronghold, but this specific ward has never really been one where the DA has contested well. It's a ward where there is a very large amount of black voters and coloured voters, and they've always struggled to penetrate this market. But as we can see here, they got 975 votes in the 2026 by-election. The ANC also rose, but they're nowhere near their historic levels. So back in 2019, they got 1,067 votes here. And so again, we see how the DA has been able to overtake the ANC. Now, what is quite notable is that in this election, as well as Cederberg, the DA actually had councillors run who defected from the ANC. And a lot of people are viewing this with a bit of scrutiny. They're worried that the sort of switching of DA and ANC councillors could be problematic because, yes, it makes the DA stronger, but they wonder whether or not there would be an ANC influence within the DA. But ultimately, the DA are trying to play to win elections, right? They want to be the biggest party. And unfortunately, there just is no other way for them to do this than to go for the ANC vote. Of course, in late 2025, the Common Sense, which is led by Dr. Frans Cronje, released this poll where they found that the DA was polling at 32% nationally, whereby the ANC was at 37%. So there's just a 5% gap. Now, it is very important for us to note that, as Dr. Cronje mentioned himself, polls are not an actual accurate prediction of what an election outcome is going to be. It's rather just a snapshot in time to gauge where the public sentiment is at that specific moment. And so, of course, this poll is not something to take too seriously, but it does indicate that there seems to be a growing warm sentiment towards the DA. And it does seem, logically speaking, that this could be from disenfranchised supporters of the ANC who decided to leave the party. And so ultimately, yes, the DA may lose its conservative base, but it's also very important to note that the conservative base of the DA is much smaller than what its potential liberal or centrist or moderate base could be by absorbing ANC voters. And so it does seem that to have somebody like a Geordin Hill-Lewis in charge could make logical sense simply due to the mathematics. But beyond the ideological perspective, there's another issue at play, which is if you don't want Geordin Hill-Lewis to be the next candidate, you need to put somebody else up who can run against him. And the reality is that if we take a look at the map of South Africa and we think of who the different DA leaders are, there really just doesn't seem to be anybody. So if we take a look at Gauteng, take a look at a place like Tshwane, right? We know that the DA came very close to beating the ANC in 2021. And of course, Cilliers Brink did manage to become the mayor of Pretoria through a coalition. But as we know, he was voted out in a vote of no confidence. And so this is not a very good look. Yes, he does seem to be quite a well-liked candidate, and he's very well-spoken. He's got a certain charisma and energy. But the problem is that everybody will remember him for not having been able to complete his term as mayor, whether or not this was justifiable. Now, of course, the DA has had that kind of candidate in John Steenhuisen, who's had question marks around his legitimacy. I'm not saying that you need to be a highly qualified person in order to run the DA, because obviously he put in the work. But there's always been that issue of him just having a matric that's always sort of haunted him. And so I assume that the DA would want to avoid this issue or any other kind of issue in the future. And so you don't want a so-called failed mayor to be your head of your party. We do see another person in Gauteng who has been able to successfully run a government for a full term, and that is Pieter Texera here in Midvaal. So as we can see from the election results, back in 2021, the DA got 62.4% of the vote, and Midvaal is known for being the best run municipality in Gauteng. But I'd like to put a question to you. Who of you know who Pieter Texera is? The answer is very few. You see, if you're not somebody who happens to see him in a TV interview or a podcast, you probably haven't heard of him, because after all, Midvaal is not a metro and it's not one of the places in South Africa that people talk about a lot. So he doesn't really seem to be the kind of guy that would have the name brand or gravitas in order to be the next leader. I'd then like for us to take a look at an interesting place called Ngeni. Now this is run by Mayor Chris Pappas, who achieved something quite remarkable here. not only has he been able to improve the running of the administration in Mgeni, but he achieved something else, which is that he managed to lead the DA to victory for their first ever municipality in KZN. Now, although this is a remarkable achievement, and Chris Papa certainly comes across as a very relatable guy, he speaks Zulu, he understands his constituents of all races and backgrounds, again, we have a problem of recognition. He's not really that well known, apart from the fact that he led the DA to this first ever win in KZN, and that he can speak Zulu. So again, it's just very hard to imagine how he's going to be able to lead the party, especially when he's the mayor of Mgeni, which is actually quite a small municipality. Furthermore, we can take a look at the Cape. Now, of course, the Western Cape is where the DA has governed well for many years and where they have the majority of their municipalities being controlled. But the big problem here is that aside from Cape Town, there's no other well-known place where the DA has a well-known mayor. For example, they may have mayors in George and Mossel Bay and Hermanus, but who of you actually know who these people are? I, for one, don't. And again, we come back to the same problem, which is the fact that there just is nobody else, at least on the mayor level, who is as well known as Geordin Hill-Lewis. Yes, we can look at the upper echelons of government, but again, we have a similar problem. Alan Winde is the premier of the Western Cape, but he's older. People are getting tired of old politicians. The DA obviously doesn't want to look like the ANC who keeps people in power for the longest time. And so maybe for them it would be good to have somebody younger like Geordin Hill-Lewis who can at least shake things up a little bit and introduce a new energy. You then could have somebody like Siviwe Gwagube or Leon Schreiber or Dean McPherson or Solly Malatsi. Those are all ministers. But again, they don't seem to specifically have any sort of following of their own. They're not big personalities. They really just seem to be worker bees. There just doesn't seem to be anybody there who screams leadership material. And then again, you've got the likes of Helen Zille, who is going to be running as Joburg mayor and really seems to be in the twilight of her political career. And so ultimately, while many people, especially those who are more conservative or right-leaning, are not so happy about Geordin Hill-Lewis, it really seems as if the DA do not have an alternative. And ultimately, he may work in their favor due to another reason, which is the fact that he's removed from the GNU. See, Geordin Hill-Lewis hasn't been tainted by being involved in a GNU where a lot of people are accusing the DA of being overtaken by the ANC. We also know that Geordin Hill-Lewis, whether you like it or not, has the best track record for running a metro out of any of the DA leaders at present. Yes, people may not love what he's doing, but it is a known fact that Cape Town is a very clean city. They fix their potholes, and ultimately imagery can be very powerful. And so if he can show people, listen, I run Cape Town, it looks like paradise, he could perhaps convince them that he could do something similar on the national stage. Whether or not this approach will work remains to be seen. But ultimately, whether one likes it or not, the DA does actually seem to be on the right track, strategically speaking. Thank you very much for tuning into this video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.